All right, guys. So really, this meeting is just to walk through the instructions for the final presentation and the final paper just a little bit and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. So I won't be talking for too long since you have access to the instructions and hopefully you've read them already. But I'll just walk through them a little bit and highlight some of the real important points. I'm going to start with the research presentation. So the presentation, hopefully you've got a chance to start working on it a little bit now that most people and individuals have analyzed their data for the most part. The presentation is just meant to be a delivery of the results from your project this semester. So this is a brief verbal presentation. 8 to 10 minutes is the window you should shoot for. If you think that that sounds like a really long time, trust me, it's not. 8 minutes goes by very, very fast. And then just a follow-up question from me. Anyone who's on the class Zoom that hears another presentation and wants to ask a question, you're free to do so. But typically the way it goes is that I'm the only one that has a follow-up question. And it's never a gotcha question or anything difficult, just sort of something that occurs to me. The delivery of the presentation is meant to be collaborative. So every person in a group should have at least some portion of the verbal presentation that they will be delivering. I want to be able to see that there was a group effort if you are working in a group. I'm not going to be timing how long one person versus another person talks, but as long as everyone contributes, at least at some point throughout the presentation, every group member should expect to receive the same grade if you are presenting as a group. Oh, this note here about being present for group presentation prep day, that's just a note from yesteryear when we used to have this in the in-person component. So there's no presentation prep day. I mean, you could consider yesterday and today your days to prepare, but there's no specific credit for being present for preparation, just for the presentation itself. So am I even in the correct document right now? Okay, so sorry if there's some like out of date information in this particular instructions document. Clearly I was doing some things kind of quickly, but if anything doesn't make sense, just feel free to ask me questions. Looks like I didn't update some of the language from the in-person class. So in terms of the content of the presentation itself, you can think of it broken down in this way. Spend a couple minutes setting up your research question. So this doesn't need to be some extensive literature review with a lot of citations, just a few minutes talking about why you were interested in the idea that you were, and how you came to the idea that you ultimately pursued for your project. And you're definitely going to want to spend the majority of your time talking about the specifics of the project itself, so the methods you used, what went into your online survey, and then definitely your analyses and results. So which analyses did you run and what did your results yield? So you're definitely going to want to spend some time talking about your primary correlational analysis, and then also whatever your secondary test is. So a t-test if you wanted to do a t-test, and ANOVA if you did an ANOVA. As long as you talk about two of your main analyses, that's really what you want. Any other details that need to be included in like a scientific manuscript, like information about your participants, all of that stuff is great too. Just sort of make sure that you have the real key stuff in there about your analyses and results, and then just fill in with whatever other informative details you think are relevant. Spend a minute or two on conclusions, just sort of takeaways. What was significant? What wasn't? What did you learn? What can you conclude from this? And then if you want to include ideas about follow-up studies, how the study could be improved in the future, those sorts of takeaways. Again, this doesn't need to be a real formal, citation heavy conclusions, just sort of what you got out of the results, what you learned, and what you think the basic findings are. There are some points associated with presentation style. Really, this mostly comes from having the correct timing. So being somewhere within that 8 to 10 window. It's not like if you go 5 seconds over 10 minutes, you lose all 5 of these points. It's sort of like the longer you go over 10 minutes or the shorter you are from 8 minutes, the more credit you're going to lose from these 5 presentation points. And then also things like the extent to which you were prepared. Again, I'm not going to be sitting there counting how many times you say or pause, not like that. Mostly just, do you appear to have practiced your presentation a little bit? Do you sort of deliver your presentation content confidently? So things like stuttering or pausing, you know, that's all fine. Just make sure to practice in advance so that you're a little bit more comfortable with the content you will be delivering. So then for the presentation delivery, you've got a couple different options, and I know a fair amount of you have already indicated your daytime preference here in this Google document. If you haven't already, please just make sure to do so. So tomorrow I'm going to hold 3 different Zooms, one at 9 a.m., one at 12 p.m., and one at 6 p.m. If you want to present during one of these times, just wait for the Canvas announcement. I'll be opening the Zoom room about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes in advance of these meeting times to let everyone log on and make sure that the screen share works. And on that note, when it's your time to present, basically you're going to log on to the Zoom. I'm going to allow you to share your screen. You're going to share a screen that has your PowerPoint presentation on it. And then you're just going to need your microphone on and your webcam too, if you're comfortable doing so. It's always, I think, a better presentation experience for the audience to be able to see who's talking. But obviously, if your webcam's not working or if you're uncomfortable with that, you're not going to lose points for not having your webcam on. But we do definitely need to hear you as well as see the slides that you're talking about. So if any of these times on these 3 meetings tomorrow work for you, great. You'll get your presentation credit for that. If none of these times work for you, but you still want to present over Zoom, which in my opinion is a lot easier than doing a pre-recording, just list your desired day and time here on the same Google document. If for whatever reason the day and time doesn't work for me, my schedule is very flexible, obviously working from home, but if it doesn't work for any reason, I'll be in touch with you. So if no Zoom times this week work, then your other option would be to just do a pre-recorded version. For creating a pre-recording for the presentation, I would recommend using a screen recording software, or you could record yourself over Zoom. You can just have a Zoom meeting with just you and your group mates and record it from there. That's a viable option. Personally, whenever I screen record for lectures, I use OBS software, which is free, and there's no limit for how long the recording can be before it cuts you off. So that's my recommendation, Zoom or OBS. But there's lots of different screen recording softwares and ways that you could record your presentation. If you do go that route, just send it to me at some point in week 6, so until Friday night. If you do need an extension, I'm happy to talk to you about that and work on it on a case-by-case basis. Again, do note that grades will be due Tuesday, June 30th at noon. So if any assignments are not to me by that day, you may receive an incomplete for the course. So you just do your best to get all of your assignments completed by this Friday. Are there any questions at this point on the presentation that you'd like to ask before I talk a little bit about the final paper? Okay. In that case, I will move on to talking a little bit about the final paper. Oh, I was totally looking at the wrong instructions. This is the instructions that you have available to you on Canvas, right? This remote version. Yeah, everything there should be correct. When I was looking at the document I just had up, I was like, what the fuck, this looks way out of date. Everything you need should be on these instructions. Y'all, I'm losing the plot just a little bit these days. All right, let's move on to talk about the final paper. All right, so the final paper is the written correlate of your presentation, essentially. It's just going to be a manuscript where you describe your project and your results. So this will also be due Friday night. Again, if you do need an extension, I'm happy to talk to you about that, but do keep in mind that the class is very quickly coming to a close. So do your best to get it by Friday night. If you do need an extension throughout the weekend, that shouldn't be a problem. Just know that I'll have relatively less time to grade it. But do try your best to get that to me by Friday night. Please have this in a Word doc format, so .doc or .docx. The page minimum, because I feel like that's the main thing that students care about. Technically, it's a 5-page minimum, but I'll show you the breakdown a little bit further down. It's really not altogether that much when you think about the different sections. APA formatting, please. I'm not going to be real hardcore draconian about taking points off for really minor APA mistakes, little nitpicky things like I don't know, italicizing certain things in a references section reference. All that is great and everything, so try your best. But really, I'm going to be looking for the really major things, like, do you have a title page? Do you include certain statistical obtained outcomes that you need? Do you use citations when necessary? So try your best to follow along with APA format. There's tons of resources out there that you can follow. I posted a few sample papers, including a student paper from a couple semesters ago. So try your best with APA formatting. And if you appear to put in a good effort, I'm not going to take points off for real minor mistakes, so don't worry or make yourself anxious about that. Really just try your best. Typical diatribe on plagiarism: do not plagiarize. It will be detected by the Turnitin plagiarism software. I don't want your writing to sound like someone else's writing. I want it to sound like you. And on this point, do note that this is an individually written assignment. Do not write with your group mates. Do not submit a single paper for your entire group. Everyone in the group should be writing this paper on their own. Yes, if you did a collaborative project, the content of the paper will be similar, obviously, but if you sit there and write on your own, the wording will naturally be a little bit different. And so that will ensure that you don't have copied text or plagiarized text from another group mate. So again, keep in mind that whereas the presentation is collaborative, the paper, you should be writing this completely on your own to avoid any academic dishonesty. So then I have more information about guidelines and page counts on the different content areas of the paper. So your title page is a standalone on a single page. That methods section, I know a few of you took the opportunity to submit a draft of your methods paper. If you didn't do that, then you'll need to produce this section, the methods, materials, procedure for your final paper. And then that should be followed by your analyses and results, which should be at least 2 pages. And this is where you just talk about the analyses that you ran and the results that you got. So you're going to at least want to cover 2 analyses, your correlational one, and then whatever secondary analysis you chose. And you can obviously include more analyses if there were other analyses you thought to do. Feel free to include as many as you want, but you're going to need at least 2. You're going to want to produce at least 1 graphic. This can be a table or a figure. The difference between tables and figures: tables are more so when you have like rows of numbers. So if you wanted to depict group means, the numerical means, that would be a table. And if you wanted to depict group means using bars, that would be a figure, it would be a chart. So the choice is up to you. You can create a table for a correlation matrix. You can create a figure, a scatter plot, a bar chart, a pie chart to depict gender breakdown in your participants, really anything you can think of, any way to depict any of the analyses that you ran. So you're going to need to do at least 1. And you're going to need to work on formatting it to be as close to APA formatting as possible. Again, I know APA formatting for tables and figures is nitpicky and annoying. Look at some of the examples that I've posted. Look at some publications. Ask me for advice. You're just going to need at least 1 graphic, table, or figure, and you can put that on its own page, or you can embed it into the text if you want, but it can count for a separate additional page as well. It doesn't need to go at the end of your paper. I would just put it in the body of the text. A discussion section, so again, quite short, 1 to 2 pages, just wrap up your interpretation for the results of your project. So whereas the results section is more so, here's the correlation that we ran, and here's the correlational result, it is significant, whatever. Discussion is where you say, okay, so our result was significant, and that tells us that there's this relationship between these variables, and that's interesting because, or you talk about any non-significant results you had, and you sort of think about why you got significant results. You just sort of interpret, you get those bigger takeaways from the results. Then you're going to want a references section, but there's no minimum or maximum for page count. Your references section is likely going to be quite short. If it's just 2 citations for your first scale and your second scale, that's perfectly fine. Feel free to include more references if you want. You don't have to. Oh, more information. I really like to spell it out as much as possible. Hold your hand kind of to the extent possible. All sorts of info that you need. A rubric, because I know students like rubrics, and then some general tips and tricks. So if you've been sitting at home thinking, how am I going to write this paper? I don't know where to start. And you haven't taken a look at that instructions document, you just saw it. It's full of information and guidelines and guidance, how it's going to be graded, what should be included in it. So I really try and explain as clearly as possible what my expectations for the paper and the presentation are. So hopefully if you did have any questions, they were answered at some point throughout my spiel here. At this point, if anyone has any questions, I'm willing to take questions about paper, presentation, or final exam. Any questions that you have about the remainder of the class, really. If you don't have any questions, feel free to log off for the day and continue working on whatever it is you have to do today.